Perfect. Okay, so hey everybody. Ida, it looks like you are our subcommittee member who is here so far. Maybe we'll get a couple of people who join in a few minutes. I'm going to share my screen. Um, okay, so hopefully you guys can see. Let me move this over. Okay, perfect. You guys can see the agenda, correct? Yeah. Okay, good. Excellent. So this is sort of our basic agenda for today. Just kind of welcome, talk about the work we're meant to do. We'll go through a little bit of information around the data and kind of some of the feedback we've gotten, but I think our main goal is to really make sure people understand what we're set to do, what our homework is for the end of the month, so that when we come back together, people will be really prepared and set to kind of give their suggestions and feedback. So I'm going to jump over here. So here are the subcommittee members. Ida's here and I'm here. We also have Scott Elliott, Anthony Graham, and Tracy Jenkins. Just in terms of general scope of work, what we're asked to, this is the same thing that's being asked of PEPSC, but as a subcommittee, what recommendations do we have regarding the math subtest data that was presented to us at the end of last semester? And so what are the recommendations? We'll present that to the full commission at a future meeting, and I'll talk a little bit about timeline here in a second. So just to make sure that everyone's on the same page, this is the legislative requirement. So there are exam requirements for initial professional license. This is around the actual examination score requirements. So elementary ed, the K-6 license, and special ed general curriculum teachers shall also achieve a prescribed minimum score on subtest or standard examination specific to both teaching, reading, and math. And so that's the legislative requirement that drives this around a test score in particular in math. And so as you guys remember, what we did was gather some feedback. The same data that was presented to us was presented to both public school, I think in the HR webinars, and then in our EPP webinars. And we put a feedback link out there to gather information. The survey question is listed here. So what recommendations do you have for us to consider and send forward, of course, to the state board? That's what we're required to do. We did receive 23 responses, and those were a mix of public school unit and EPP responses, which is good. Not a ton of responses, but it is nice that we did get a mix. And everybody on the subcommittee was sent a link to all of the feedback. And then, of course, Kim was wonderful enough to kind of do a little bit of coding for us and highlighting to help kind of guide people. And so this is really just a summary of the feedback that we got. There were several different recommendations, as you might imagine, and they included everything from reducing the math subtest cut score, which some of the analysis data we got did show what would happen positively and negatively if test score cutoff scores were changed. So we have a little bit of information to guide us there, but that was one suggestion. Having additional options to meet the requirement. So EdTPA and elementary education math. I'll just say as an EPP person, I think one major concern at the end of the day that EPPs will have around that is it would mean that student teachers were being asked to do two separate EdTPAs as they do the literacy one now. I think that's a really huge ask. There were suggestions around using NISA's performance data, certifying content fulfillment, so some sort of core math in terms of classes and EdTPA combined, some sort of core math plus methods courses combined. There were also courses or kind of module completion on unpacking standards, so interpreting and implementing standards in math, classroom performance over time for emergency and or permit to teach license years, selection of an entirely different test, and there were a couple of suggestions there, things like EVOS data, and then utilizing test prep during the beginning teacher year. So those are the major suggestions that we saw in the feedback. I don't know if you had time to look at this ahead of time or had any questions around that feedback.
No, I did look at it. I don't have any questions.
Okay, perfect. So that kind of tells you where you are. Like I said, everyone got the feedback. We also resent the analysis data, which is a lot to dig into. I know we talked about it a lot at the meeting, but there's a lot here. So we wanted to resend that. So I think everybody's kind of equipped with the information. And then, of course, we can also talk to colleagues and peers and others to continue to get feedback from other people in general. But homework. So we, as a subcommittee, really need to think about what our recommendations are. And so our thought here right now, we can be flexible with this date, but when we met to sort of predetermine the timeline for the semester, I think our goal will be to present to PEPSC March 13th at that meeting. So that's what we are hoping to do. We'll kind of put that as our goal for right now. And so what we did is there's a link to the homework that really is kind of open-ended. It allows everyone to go through the feedback and the data analysis and then put specific recommendations in. So we'd love for everyone on the subcommittee to do that, use the link and put in their own ideas by the end of the month. So by January 31st. And then when we come together for our February meeting, everyone will have really had time to dig in, have their own ideas in mind. And then, of course, ahead of that meeting, we'll send everyone on the committee a compilation of what we all set as our recommendations. And hopefully we'll be able to spend our time that day really kind of going through and we'll at least be able to determine, are we ready to make a recommendation to the larger commission at that March date. So that's kind of where we are in terms of timeline. Not a lot to go over today. We really just wanted to make sure that everybody was on the same page and knew what our goal was, that you had all the data to be able to dig in, and that everyone knows what their assignment is. I'm going to stop sharing just so I can see everybody again. And I think that Kim, she sure did. Kim also dumped you have the PDF, of the presentation, which has a link to homework. But Kim also dumped the link into the chat. So if you want to get it that way and save it, that's another good way to do it. And I think what we'll do today, Ida's, after the meeting, we'll send an email just kind of reiterating all of this to everybody on the committee, especially since we're not all here, and we can drop that link into the email. So people will have it in case, and you know how it goes. A week or 10 days from now, people are like, oh, I got to do my homework. We want to make sure people have the information in multiple different places.
Kim, I think, and everybody, one thing that I might add is I saw that in some of the recommendations had to do, or where people were just suggesting potential recommendations, there were several that had to do with the Praxis core math. And it might be helpful for the subcommittee, if they're thinking along those lines, to look at the similar set of analysis that we did prior to this analysis, where we looked at the core math and its relationship to outcomes in teaching. And that was something that we presented to PEPSC, and then they in turn presented to the state board. And we could provide, if that were something that we're considering, I think it would be good to look at those materials.
I think that's a great idea. And I know Kim can probably help us do that when we send out the email, send that information for people to look at. When we think about that, my mind immediately started scrambling. If we make a recommendation like that, what happens if we finally make progress to having Praxis score go away? So then where are we with that? And then I think some folks might question us of, why are you now recommending this when first you recommended that we not do it at all, which really I think brings up a timing issue. So if we did make a recommendation like this, we would be in turn, I think, recommending that Praxis core math happen at the end like where the exam happens now after the candidates have had all of their coursework, not just their methods, but all of whatever math coursework is required for their program, as opposed to prior to getting into a teacher education program altogether, which happens if you're talking about a traditional setup, which of course we all know the sort of residency license folks don't take it at all. But for a traditional undergraduate program, you're talking about freshman, sophomore year. So anyway, just all those thoughts like immediately come to mind. But I think it's a great idea to look at that data from that subcommittee. So I think we've covered, unless Kim, you're always great to tell me if I forgot something major. I think we've covered all the content and kind of equipped people with what we need to do.
Right. Yes, you have.
Perfect. And so, like I said, we'll follow up with an email. I can put something together in terms of narrative with attachments, Kim, and send it to you. And then if you're able to easily pull the Praxis Core data so
Sure.
we can attach that as well, I think that'd be fantastic. And we can send it out to everyone.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. So I'm hoping, because we didn't take up a lot of people's time today, and this is what I would say to my class, right? So now you have all this time back. We could utilize that to do some of our homework, right? Because I think it would be highly beneficial to us as a group if everyone individually thought through and made some recommendations before we came together as a group. And that, I think, just initially it can help us see, are we even close to being on the same page? Which is something that's going to be an important conversation at the larger commission too. Okay, so if there's nothing else from any of the group, I think we are good to adjourn. Do we need to vote to adjourn, Kim? Not, because we're
No, no.
Yeah. Okay. So like I said, we'll follow up in an email and be really clear about what we want people to do before we meet next time. I'll put in there a reminder of when our next meeting is, but everyone should have a calendar invite for that, and we should be good to go.
Thank you.
Good,
All
thank
right.
you.
Thanks, everybody.